It's the first hours of dawn. The sky is stained a deep, almost sickly red as the sun struggles to push through an atmosphere heavy with volcanic ash. You're standing in what will one day be Siberia, but this landscape looks like nothing you've ever seen. All around you, a forest of strange trees stretches to the horizon. Not pines or oaks, but giant lycophytes, their scaly trunks rising like 30-meter columns. The air is thick and warm, and it carries a sharp, acrid smell that lightly burns your throat. Then the ground trembles beneath your feet. Not a violent earthquake, more like a steady, rhythmic vibration coming from something massive moving through the trees. Giant fern fronds whip and shudder, and then you see it, a creature the size of a rhinoceros bursting out of the foliage. Its skin is thick and rough, its body stocky and powerful, and from its jaws protrude two curved tusks that point downward like sabers. It isn't a dinosaur. Dinosaurs don't exist yet. This is Moschops, a plant-eating reptile that dominates these late Permian forests, living in a world that's about to change forever. But something feels wrong in the air. The insects, dragonflies with wingspans as wide as seagulls, fly erratically, disoriented. In the distance, columns of smoke rise from fissures in the ground, and every so often, an orange glow lights up the night horizon. Something terrible is brewing deep inside the planet, something that in a matter of thousands of years will erase 96% of all marine life and 70% of land vertebrates. But for now, on this ordinary day in the late Permian, life goes on, unaware of the catastrophe creeping closer. Can you imagine what it would feel like to live 24 hours in this alien world? A world with no dinosaurs, no modern mammals, no flowers or birds, yet filled with creatures so bizarre and fascinating, they look like they walked straight out of a science fiction film. Today, my fellow explorer of time, I'm inviting you to experience a full day on Earth in the late Permian, more than 252 million years ago, right before the planet enters the most devastating extinction event in its entire history. Before we begin this extraordinary journey, leave me a comment telling me which Permian creature you'd most want to meet. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep exploring the lost worlds of the past together. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a single adventure. Thank you. And now, let our day in the Permian begin. 6 a.m., dawn in Pangaea. Our day starts in the early morning hours in what we now call South Africa, though in the late Permian it was part of the supercontinent Pangaea. The name rings a bell for a reason. Pangaea was the last of Earth's great unified landmasses, with almost every continent fused into a single colossal block surrounded by the global ocean, Panthalassa. Pangaea's geography created extreme climate conditions, with so much land concentrated. In one place, the interior regions sat impossibly far from the ocean, forming vast deserts in the supercontinent's heart. Coastal zones and equatorial regions enjoyed milder, wetter climates, but inland Pangaea was a harsh, scorching wasteland where only the toughest organisms could survive. Where we're standing this morning is a transition zone, a lycophyte forest near a great river that snakes through the landscape. The lycophytes, giant ancestors of today's tiny club mosses, dominate the vegetation. Some reach 30 meters or more, with thick trunks marked by a distinctive diamond pattern of scars where leaves once attached. Unlike modern trees, lycophytes don't have true wood. Their trunks are largely hollow, supported by thick bark and spongy internal tissue. Around us grow tree ferns, some 5 to 10 meters tall. Their enormous fronds unfold like green umbrellas, filtering the dawn light into mottled patterns across the forest floor. We also see Glossopteris, a seed, plant characteristic of the southern half of Pangaea, with its unmistakable tongue-shaped leaves. These plants are so abundant and so diagnostic that geologists use them to identify Permian rocks across the southern hemisphere. But what really stands out are the early conifers. Unlike modern pines and firs, these Permian conifers look strange. Some with branches spreading horizontally in geometric tiers, others with scale-like leaves pressed tightly against thick stems. They're among the dominant seed plants of the Permian, and their evolutionary success comes down to one crucial innovation: the seed. Unlike ferns and lycophytes, which reproduce via spores and need water for fertilization, seed plants can reproduce in drier environments, giving them a huge advantage across many regions of Pangaea. The morning air is filled with unfamiliar sounds. There's no birdsong because birds don't exist yet. Instead, you hear the low, heavy hum of giant insects, dragonflies with wingspans up to 70 centimeters patrol forest clearings, snatching smaller prey in midair. Their iridescent wings catch the sunrise, flashing color as they maneuver with astonishing precision. On the forest floor, among leaf litter and low ferns, creatures move that look like they belong in a nightmare. An arthropleura, a giant myriapod related to modern centipedes but the size of a crocodile, crawls slowly over the mulch. This armored herbivore feeds on decaying plant matter, using its many legs to glide forward with surprising grace despite its massive bulk. Arthropleura reached its absolute peak size in the Carboniferous, when atmospheric oxygen levels were even higher. But large individuals still persist into the Permian. From a fallen log, a Mesosaurus emerges, an aquatic reptile around 30 centimeters long that spent the night sheltered along the riverbank. This animal is remarkable because it represents one of the earliest reptiles to return to the water after their ancestors conquered land. It has an elongated body, webbed feet, and a laterally flattened tail for swimming. Its jaws are lined with fine, needle-like teeth, perfect for catching the small crustaceans it feeds on. Mesosaurus slides into the river, where the water mirrors the shifting colors of the morning sky. This river is the lifeline of the ecosystem, offering fresh water in a world where many regions suffer brutal seasonal droughts. Along the banks grow dense stands of giant horsetails, primitive plants related to modern equisetoms that can reach several meters tall in the Permian. As the sun rises higher, the temperature begins to climb. Late Permian Earth is generally warmer than today, with no permanent polar ice caps. Global temperatures run high, and equatorial regions can be punishingly hot. Still, in this mid-latitude zone, mornings can feel relatively cool before the day's heat fully settles in. The Permian atmosphere isn't like ours. Oxygen levels have dropped from their Carboniferous highs, when they reached around 35%, to roughly 15 to 16%, far below today's 21%. That decline helps explain why the truly gigantic arthropods of the Carboniferous, dragonflies with 75-centimeter wingspans and Arthropleura stretching 2.5 meters, have shrunk over time. Insects breathe through a tracheal system that relies on passive diffusion of oxygen, and lower oxygen levels place a hard cap on how big they can grow. Carbon dioxide, on the other hand, is slowly rising. Deep inside the Earth, in what will one day be Siberia, a massive volcanic province is beginning to stir. The Siberian traps, as they'll be called millions of years later, are on the verge of unleashing one of the most catastrophic volcanic episodes in the planet's history. But for now, on this calm morning, the warnings are subtle. Occasional tremors, a faint sulfur bite in the air when the wind blows from the north, and distant smoke columns that the inhabitants of this world have learned to ignore. 9 a.m., the giant herbivores. As morning advances, the forest comes alive with the movement of enormous plant eaters. In a nearby clearing, a herd of moschops steps out from between the trees to feed on low vegetation. These extraordinary animals are therapsids, members of a lineage that includes the ancestors of modern mammals. Though moschops itself looks almost nothing like any mammal alive today, an adult moschops can weigh up to 500 kilograms and stretch more than 5 meters long. Its body is massive and barrel-shaped, with sturdy legs splayed outward in a semi-sprawling stance, nothing like the upright posture of modern mammals. Its head is huge, with a skull so thick it seems almost absurd. For decades, scientists have debated why. Some propose moschops used those thick skulls for ritual headbutting contests, like modern rams. Others argue the skull simply offered protection against predators. They feed voraciously, ripping up ferns low. branches and foliage with powerful jaws. Unlike modern herbivores with specialized teeth for chewing, Moschops has relatively uniform teeth used mostly for cutting and tearing plants. Breaking down that tough, fibrous plant matter likely required a long digestive tract and symbiotic gut bacteria, much like the system many herbivores rely on today. Moschops' social structure also appears complex. The herd we're watching includes animals of different ages and sizes, from juveniles about as big as a large dog to truly massive adults. The largest adults, likely males, hold central positions, while younger individuals keep closer to the edges, more alert to danger. Not far from the Moschops, another remarkable herbivore arrives, Scutosaurus, a massive pariasaur, one of the largest plant-eating reptiles of the Permian. This animal is genuinely intimidating in its own way. It can reach 3 meters long and weigh over a ton. Its skin is studded with osteoderms, bony plates embedded in the flesh, forming formidable armor against predators. Its head is broad and flat, decorated with small horn-like knobs jutting from the skull. Scutosaurus moves slowly, with a heavy gait that makes the ground tremble ever so slightly with each step. It grazes on low plants, using a horny beak to crop tough vegetation. Unlike Moschops, which belongs to the therapsid line that will eventually lead to mammals, Scutosaurus is a para-reptile, part of a branch that will go completely extinct, leaving no direct modern descendants. High up in the lycophyte branches, another kind of creature feeds among the leaves. Suminia, small arboreal therapsids about the size of an opossum, are among the earliest vertebrates to specialize in life in the trees. They have curved claws for gripping branches and prehensile tails to help them balance. Their teeth show clear adaptations for herbivory, with flattened molars designed for grinding plant material. Suminia's presence in the canopy matters because it represents the opening of a new ecological frontier. In the Carboniferous, trees were dominated mostly by invertebrates, especially insects. Now, in the Permian, vertebrates are beginning to colonize the treetops, setting a pattern that will continue for the rest of terrestrial vertebrate evolution. The forest echoes with the sounds of feeding, branches snapping, massive bodies brushing through vegetation, occasional grunts and snorts. To modern ears, these noises feel alien. Moschops probably didn't moo like cattle or trumpet like elephants. Their calls may have been guttural hisses, deep snorts, or even infrasonic sounds too low for humans to clearly register. The sheer volume of vegetation consumed is staggering. A mixed group of Moschops and Scutosaurus can strip an area in a matter of days, forcing them to keep moving in search of fresh feeding grounds. This intense grazing reshapes the forest itself, creating clearings and encouraging pioneer plants that thrive in disturbed environments. 12 p.m., midday and the predators. By noon, the sun is high, and the heat has turned oppressive. Temperatures climb above 35 degrees Celsius, and humidity hangs heavy near the river. Many of the large herbivores retreat into shade beneath the lycophytes or move toward the water to drink and cool down. And it's in this moment of vulnerability that the predators appear. From the undergrowth emerges one of the Permian's most terrifying animals, Inostransevia, the largest gorgonopsid and one of the most formidable land predators of its time. This creature is a killing machine, a muscular body more than 3.5 meters long and saber-like teeth jutting from the upper jaw like lethal blades. Gorgonopsids like Inostransevia are therapsids, meaning they're more closely related to mammals than to modern reptiles. In fact, they represent a fascinating evolutionary stage between early reptiles and true mammals. They aren't mammals, but they show mammal-like traits. Their legs sit more beneath the body than in typical reptiles, allowing more efficient locomotion. Their teeth are differentiated, incisors, canines, and distinct rear teeth. And they likely had higher metabolisms than typical reptiles, though not as high as modern mammals. The Inostransevia we're watching is a female, slightly smaller than the largest males, but no less deadly. She advances silently toward the clearing where Moschops are resting, body low, head stretched forward in a classic stalking posture. Her eyes, set toward the front of the skull, give her a degree of binocular vision, crucial for judging distance during an attack. Her target is a Moschops juvenile that has drifted too far from the protective adults. Inostrancevia exploits the mistake with brutal precision. In a sudden burst of speed, shocking for an animal this large, she closes the gap in seconds. Her massive upper canines, up to 15 centimeters long, drive deep into the juvenile's neck, tearing into muscle and vital blood vessels. The attack is savage, but efficient. The juvenile collapses, crying out in distress and alerting the herd. Adults swing around in agitation, but the predator has already secured the kill. Despite their bulk and thickened skulls, adult Moschops are herbivores. They lack the weapons to truly challenge a specialized predator like this. After a tense moment of chaos, the herd withdraws, leaving Inostrancevia alone with her meal. She begins feeding immediately. Unlike modern mammalian carnivores, often forced to eat fast because rivals might steal their kill, Inostrancevia is the undisputed apex predator here. She can take her time, using her front teeth to rip huge strips of flesh from the carcass. But she isn't entirely alone for long. The smell of blood carries. Soon, other animals appear, drawn in like shadows. A group of Antiosaurus, more primitive therapsids than the gorgonopsids, but still formidable predators, watches from a distance. Antiosaurus are massive, some reaching 5 to 6 meters long, with huge skulls and sharp teeth. But they're slower and less specialized than Inostrancevia, and they likely relied on scavenging as much as active hunting. The largest Antiosaurus in the group, an alpha male, approaches cautiously. He's bigger than Inostrancevia, but the gorgonopsid has no intention of sharing. She whirls toward him with a threatening hiss, flashing blood-stained teeth. Antiosaurus freezes, weighing the risk. After a brief standoff, he decides it isn't worth a fight and backs away. He'll wait, knowing that eventually Inostrancevia will be full and leave whatever remains. Above the feeding scene, smaller creatures watch in tense silence. Arboreal Suminia stay perfectly still. Any movement could attract the wrong kind of attention. Several sclerocephalus, primitive amphibians shaped like oversized salamanders, edge cautiously out of the river. These animals can reach 2 meters long. They're mostly aquatic, but they sometimes venture onto land to take advantage of moments like this. Insects respond too. Primitive flies, distant relatives of modern flies, begin to gather, drawn to the scent. By the Permian, insects have already diversified into many of the ecological roles they occupy today. Herbivores, predators, scavengers, parasites. Permian flies aren't identical to modern ones, but their function in the ecosystem is eerily familiar. The feeding lasts more than an hour. Inostrancevia consumes an astonishing amount of meat, enough to sustain her for days. Predatory therapsids like this likely had higher metabolisms than typical reptiles, but lower than modern mammals, meaning they needed regular meals, just not as frequently as a mammalian carnivore of similar size. Eventually satiated, Inostrancevia slips back into the forest to rest and digest. The moment she disappears, others close in. Antiosaurus finally takes its turn, along with a crowd of scavengers, smaller, reptiles, amphibians, even invertebrates. Within hours, little will remain of the juvenile Moschops except scattered bones and dark stains in the soil. This cycle, predation and scavenging, is the engine of the Permian ecosystem. Top predators keep herbivore numbers in check, preventing them from stripping the landscape bare. Scavengers recycle nutrients, returning what would otherwise stay locked in rotting carcasses back into the living system. 3 p.m., life in the river. As afternoon deepens, we leave the forest and approach the river, where an entirely different ecosystem thrives. Here, the water runs wide and slow, with shallow zones thick with aquatic plants and deeper stretches where the river turns dark and unknowable. The banks are lined with giant horsetails and ferns leaning over the water. In the shallows, something moves. A group of Diplocolus swims with smooth, undulating motions. These amphibians are instantly recognizable by their boomerang-shaped heads. That sideways expanded skull may have acted like a hydrofoil, helping them maneuver, or it may have served as defense, making Diplocaulus difficult for predators to swallow. They're relatively small, around 60 centimeters long, feeding on aquatic invertebrates, young fish, and larvae. Their eyes sit on top of the head, allowing them to stay hidden along the riverbed while watching the surface for prey and danger. But Diplocaulus isn't alone. Far larger forms lurk deeper down. A Prionosuchus, one of the largest amphibians that ever lived, lies motionless along the bottom. This aquatic apex predator can reach 9 meters, rivaling modern crocodiles in size. Its body is long and serpentine, with short limbs that are almost vestigial, used more for dragging along the bottom than for swimming. Its head is broad and flat, jaws packed with conical, razor-sharp teeth built to seize large fish and other amphibians. Prionosuchus is an ambush hunter. It can stay still for hours, blending seamlessly into the riverbed, waiting for an unsuspecting animal to drift too close. Then it strikes with explosive speed, jaws snapping open and creating a suction rush that pulls prey straight into its mouth. It's a hunting method refined by aquatic predators for hundreds of millions of years. Permian fish are diverse and abundant. We see schools of Xenacanthus, freshwater sharks with bizarre proportions. Unlike modern marine sharks, Xenacanthus has a long, prominent spine projecting from the back of the head, likely a defense against larger predators. Its dorsal fin stretches along much of its body, giving it a strange silhouette. These primitive sharks are versatile hunters, feeding on fish, invertebrates, and even small amphibians. There are also early bony fish, ancestors of today's immense diversity of ray-finned fishes. They're generally smaller than Xenacanthus, streamlined with shining scales. They feed on aquatic insects, tiny crustaceans, and algae, filling the lower tiers of the aquatic food web. At the surface, aquatic insects swarm. Mayfly larvae, primitive dragonfly nymphs, and other aquatic forms feed on detritus and microorganisms. Adult dragonflies emerge after completing their larval development, transforming from underwater hunters into airborne predators. With wingspans up to 70 centimeters, Permian dragonflies dominate the skies, snatching other insects in flight with spiny legs. The river also teems with invertebrates. Primitive crustaceans, distant cousins of shrimp and crabs, crawl along the bottom, feeding on detritus and small organisms. Freshwater mollusks, including early snails and bivalves, filter particles from the water or scrape algae off rocks. The connection between land and water is intense. Terrestrial animals depend on the river for drinking water, especially during the dry season. Herbivores come to drink, exposing themselves to predators on land and in the water. Large amphibians like Prionosuchus occasionally haul onto the banks to bask, absorbing heat to regulate their body temperature. The river also carries nutrients from the interior toward coastal regions and ultimately the ocean. Fallen leaves, dead wood, and animal carcasses get swept downstream, feeding organisms far away. This ecosystem connectivity is essential to the health of the Permian landscape. But as we watch, something feels unsettling. In some stretches, the water looks less clear than it should, tinged faintly red. Small dead fish occasionally drift at the surface. These are subtle signs of environmental stress, possibly caused by increasing runoff of sediments and chemicals from volcanically active regions to the north. The planet is changing, slowly, inexorably, and those changes will eventually turn catastrophic. 6 p.m., sunset, and nightlife awakens. As the sun sinks toward the horizon, the forest transforms again. The sunset is spectacular but strange. Deep reds, blazing oranges, and occasional green flickers as sunlight filters through ash layers high in the atmosphere. The Permian sky often has this surreal quality, especially in regions with heavy volcanic activity. Temperatures begin to drop, and animals respond. Moschops and Scutosaurus move into sheltered parts of the forest to spend the night, huddling together for warmth and safety in numbers. Some large amphibians, like Sclerocephalus, return fully to the water, spending the night submerged, surfacing occasionally to breathe. But while some prepare to sleep, others are only beginning their day. The Permian had a rich nocturnal fauna adapted to exploit the dark hours when many daytime hunters were inactive. One of the most fascinating nocturnal animals is Suminia, the small tree-dwelling therapsid we saw earlier. It can be active by day, but many Suminia species were likely most active at dusk and during the night. Their large eyes suggest adaptation to low light. At night, they feed on tender shoots, tree sap, and possibly insects, sometimes descending to the forest floor to drink or search for specific foods. Another notable night creature is the Croniosuchian, a group of extinct reptiliomorphs that filled niches similar to modern crocodiles. They spent the day hidden in burrows or beneath fallen logs, emerging at dusk to hunt. With flattened bodies and short legs, they were competent swimmers, but also capable on land, feeding on fish, small amphibians, and anything else they could seize along the riverbanks at night. Nocturnal insects surge into motion too. Primitive moths, ancestors of modern moths, emerged to feed on nectar from gymnosperms with early flower-like structures. True flowering plants, angiosperms, won't evolve until the Cretaceous, but some Permian gymnosperms produced blossom-like reproductive organs that attracted insect pollinators. This mutualism was still primitive, but it was already laying down patterns that would dominate plant-pollinator relationships for the next hundreds of millions of years. Night arachnids are everywhere. Primitive scorpions, some over 20 centimeters long, crawl out to hunt. They already have venomous stingers and are efficient predators of insects, other arachnids, and even small vertebrates. Early spiders, not yet as diverse as they would become, hunt at night too, relying more on ambush than on elaborate webs, which would evolve later. The Permian night sky feels different from ours. The moon appears slightly larger because it's closer to Earth. The moon is slowly receding at about 3.8 centimeters per year, meaning that 252 million years ago, it was roughly 9,600 kilometers closer. The stars are the same, but the constellations look different because star positions shift over time as they move through the galaxy. And there's something else. Occasional flashes of light on the northern horizon. Not lightning, an eerie glow from distant volcanic eruptions in the Siberian traps. The eruptions are increasing in frequency and intensity, pouring immense quantities of lava, ash, and gases into the atmosphere. Although the climax is still thousands of years away, the global system is already beginning to feel the pressure. 9 p.m., the heart of the night. As night deepens, the forest grows darker and more mysterious. The moon, now high overhead, gives enough light to make out the silhouettes of giant trees and the occasional movement of animals. Night sounds are completely different from daytime. The constant drone of insects, the occasional splash from the river, and calls we can't fully identify, reminding us we're in a truly alien world. Large nocturnal predators are active as well. A gorgonopsid smaller than the Inostrancevia we saw earlier, yet still dangerous, moves silently through the undergrowth. Gorgonopsids have sharp senses tuned for night hunting, strong low-light vision, excellent hearing, and likely a reasonably developed sense of smell. This individual is searching for smaller prey, perhaps Dictodon, a rabbit-sized burrowing therapsid. Dictodon is incredibly common in the late Permian, and its fossils appear in huge numbers in South Africa. These animals lived in complex burrows, emerging at night to feed on roots, tubers, and low plants. They're specialized herbivores with two prominent upper tusks, likely used for digging and possibly for defense. The gorgonopsid locates a Dictodon burrow and crouches near the entrance, waiting in perfect stillness. It's a strategy that demands patience and silence. Nearly an hour passes. Then a Dictodon creeps out, sniffing the air. The gorgonopsid strikes instantly, but the small herbivore is fast. In a split second, it vanishes back underground, escaping by a heartbeat. Frustrated, the predator moves on. High in the canopy, Suminia are especially active. They slip from branch to branch, communicating in soft chirps. Their large eyes allow them to navigate treetops even in near darkness. Sometimes they snatch nocturnal insects, adding animal protein to a mostly herbivorous diet. Down in the river, the surface seems calm, but below it's a frenzy. Prionosuchus is actively hunting now, using sensory systems to detect vibrations from fish moving through the darkness. When it senses a larger fish, it moves with surprising speed for such a huge animal, jaws snapping shut around the prey before it can react. Smaller amphibians are active too. Temnospondyls the size of modern salamanders emerge to hunt invertebrates along the wet banks. These small amphibians are incredibly diverse in the Permian, filling a wide range of ecological roles, from fully aquatic to semi-terrestrial. One striking thing about Permian nights is what you don't hear. No modern frog choruses, though Permian amphibians may have produced some sounds. No crickets chirping the way we know them, though early orthopterans may have stridulated. No wolves howling, no owls calling, no bats squeaking. The Permian is a world before many of the groups that dominate modern ecosystems. Yet other sounds fill the gap. Large reptiliomorphs may produce territorial calls, hisses, or low growls. Big insects, nocturnal dragonflies, early beetles, create audible buzzes and clicks. And wind pushing through lycophyte forests produces a sound unlike the rustle of modern leaves, something older, stranger. 12 a.m., midnight and the signs of the apocalypse. At midnight, we reach the darkest, quietest point of our Permian day. Most animals, day and night alike, have slowed their activity. It's a calm pause before dawn, before the cycle begins again. But even in the stillness, the world is whispering that it's changing. On the northern horizon, something unusual dances. Auroras, shimmering curtains of light. In the late Permian, Earth's magnetic activity may have been in flux, perhaps tied to shifts in the planet's core, making auroras more frequent and visible at lower latitudes than today. The ground trembles now and then, distant seismic shudders from regions where tectonic forces are intense. Pangaea may look stable, but it's under enormous stress. Plates are strained, and in some regions, especially near the Siberian traps, the crust is literally beginning to tear apart. If we could travel north to what will become Siberia, we'd see something truly apocalyptic. Massive fissures in the ground are spilling lava in unimaginable quantities. These aren't classic cone volcanoes. Instead, lava wells up through long cracks in the Earth's crust, forming vast flood basalt fields stretching across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. These eruptions are blasting gases into the atmosphere on a staggering scale: carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, methane, and other volatile compounds. Sulfur dioxide reacts with atmospheric water vapor to form sulfuric acid, creating acid rain that falls across enormous regions. Carbon dioxide drives rising global temperatures through the greenhouse effect. Methane, released from underground deposits heated by the eruptions, is an even more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2. These shifts are happening on timescales from decades to thousands of years, far too fast for many species to adapt. The oceans begin absorbing excess CO2, turning more acidic and less hospitable for organisms with shells or calcium skeletons. Ocean temperatures rise, reducing dissolved oxygen. In the depths, anoxic conditions spread, expanding dead zones across vast areas. On land, rising heat stresses ecosystems. Plants adapted to cooler, more stable conditions start to suffer. Lycophyte forests, which depend on moist environments, retreat as droughts become more frequent and severe. Herbivores dependent on these plants struggle to find enough food, and predators suffer in turn as prey populations decline. Large hunters like Inostrancevia are among the first to feel the squeeze, because they require large amounts of food to sustain their relatively high metabolisms. Gorgonopsid populations begin to fragment and fall. But right now, in this quiet night, the changes remain subtle. The moshop sleeping in the forest doesn't know its species is doomed. The Prionosuchus stalking the river can't imagine giant amphibians will be crushed by the extinction to come. The Dictodon tucked inside its burrow has no concept that it is living in the final days of an age. When the Permian-Triassic extinction finally arrives in full force, 252 million years ago, it will be the most severe mass extinction event in known Earth history, wiping out roughly 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. Entire ecosystems will collapse. Dominant groups like trilobites, survivors of every previous extinction for more than 270 million years, will vanish completely. Gorgonopsids, the super predators of the Permian, will disappear without leaving direct descendants. And yet, extinction also opens doors. The survivors will diversify rapidly in the early Triassic. The therapsids that make it through, especially the cynodonts, will eventually evolve into true mammals. A relatively obscure group of reptiles called archosaurs will seize the empty niches, eventually giving rise to dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and crocodiles. 3 a.m., the hours before dawn. In the darkest hours before sunrise, there's a sense of anticipation in the air. Nocturnal animals are finishing their activity while the earliest diurnal creatures begin to stir. It's a transition window when the night world and day world briefly overlap. Up in the trees, Suminia starts searching for safe places to sleep through the daylight. Some curl up inside tree hollows, others hide deep in dense foliage. Their survival depends on staying concealed from day hunters that will begin moving as soon as there's enough light. On the forest floor, invertebrates are astonishingly active. Giant millipedes, some as long as a human arm, move slowly through the leaf litter, feeding on decaying plant matter. They play a critical role in nutrient recycling, breaking down dead vegetation and returning it to the system for plants to use again. Scorpions that hunted through the night begin withdrawing to their shelters. Some burrow into loose soil, others slip beneath rocks or fallen logs. They'll remain inactive through the day's heat, conserving water and energy. In the river, fish drift into deeper water or into dense vegetation where they can hide from predators that hunt by day. Nocturnal amphibians return to the water or seek damp, shaded places to keep their skin from drying out. The eastern sky begins to brighten, just a pale band of light against the deep darkness. The first birds of the Permian, except there are no birds. The thought hits again. We're in a world before so many familiar groups existed. No dawn chorus, no mammals darting through the brush, no flowering plants. It's profoundly different, yet in some ways strangely recognizable. Flying insects begin to awaken. Dragonflies that spent the night perched in vegetation start warming their flight muscles, vibrating their wings in preparation. It's energetically expensive, but necessary. Insect flight muscles don't work efficiently when cold. Somewhere in the forest, an Inostrancevia wakes from its digestive sleep. It has spent the night and part of the previous day processing its heavy meal from the Moschops juvenile. Now lighter, it's ready to move again. It isn't hungry yet, but instinct drives it to patrol its territory, marking boundaries with secretions from specialized glands and warning other predators that this land is claimed. Large herbivores begin to rise too. Adult Moschops heave themselves upright, shaking their enormous bodies. Juveniles are more energetic, bounding and playing for a brief moment before the herd begins its daily movement in search of fresh feeding grounds. That play behavior is fascinating. It suggests that even these early therapsids had complex social dynamics. 5:30 a.m., the cycle closes. As we approach the end of our 24 hours in the Permian, the cycle is about to complete itself. The sun begins to rise again, painting the sky with the same strange, beautiful colors we saw at the start. The forest stirs, and life begins another day in its endless struggle to survive. We think back on everything we've witnessed. This Permian world is both familiar and alien. The basic ecological rules are the same. Primary producers, plants, convert sunlight into chemical energy. Herbivores feed on plants. Carnivores hunt herbivores. Scavengers and decomposers recycle nutrients. Food webs still follow the same fundamental laws that govern ecosystems today. But the cast of characters is completely different. Not a single true mammal exists yet, though therapsids like Moschops and Inostrancevia represent key steps on the road toward mammals. There are no dinosaurs, no birds, no flowering plants. Arthropods are larger and in some ways more diverse than many of their modern descendants. Giant amphibians dominate aquatic ecosystems in a way they never will again. And we've seen the subtle warning signs of what's coming: rising volcanic activity, shifting climate, stressed ecosystems. These changes will accelerate over the next thousands of years, culminating in the most severe mass extinction the planet has ever endured. Yet even in the shadow of that approaching devastation, there is hope. Life is astonishingly resilient. The survivors of the Permian-Triassic extinction will rebuild the biosphere, creating new ecosystems that will one day become as complex and diverse as the ones that were lost. From those survivors will come the dinosaurs that dominate the Mesozoic, the mammals that dominate the Cenozoic, and eventually the humans who will look back in awe at this deep, ancient past. The Permian teaches lessons that feel uncomfortably relevant today. It shows us that life on Earth is always in motion, responding to environmental change, evolving, adapting. It also reminds us that even the most robust ecosystems can be driven to collapse when environmental shifts become fast and severe enough. The late Permian saw rapid global warming, ocean acidification, oxygen loss in the seas, and ecosystem breakdown, themes that echo disturbingly with the environmental challenges we face now. Still, the Permian story isn't only a story of extinction, it's also a story of persistence, of adaptation, of resilience. It's a reminder that even the worst catastrophes are not the end of the narrative, only a chapter, however painful, in the ongoing epic of life on Earth. Conclusion. Our 24 hours in the late Permian have come to an end. We've walked through forests of towering lycophytes, watched massive herbivores feeding, witnessed the violence of saber-toothed predators, explored rivers filled with giant amphibians and primitive fish, and felt both the beauty and the ominous warning signs of a world poised on the brink of catastrophic change. The Permian was an age of extremes. Giant predators with saber teeth larger than those of any mammalian carnivore that would evolve later. Amphibians as large as crocodiles. Insects with wingspans wider than many modern birds. It was a time when therapsids, the ancestors of mammals, ruled the land, when forests of primitive plants covered vast regions of Pangaea, when life reached levels of complexity and diversity that could rival any later era. But it was also a time of vulnerability. The Permian-Triassic mass extinction reminds us that no golden age lasts forever, that ecological systems, no matter how stable or intricate they seem, can be shattered by environmental change that is fast enough and severe enough. For us, in the 21st century, looking back into this remote past, there are lessons worth carrying forward. The Permian reveals the breathtaking range of forms life can take, the near-limitless creativity of evolution. It also warns us about the consequences of rapid environmental change and reminds us of our responsibility as the first species in Earth's history capable of understanding and potentially preventing a mass extinction. The next time you see a mammal, remember it descends from the Permian therapsid survivors that endured when 70% of land vertebrates vanished. The next time you see a crocodile or a bird, remember their archosaur ancestors also survived that same catastrophe. We are all, in the end, descendants of the toughest, most adaptable survivors of the worst mass extinction the planet has ever known. I hope this journey through a single day in the late Permian gave you a deeper appreciation for the history of life on Earth, for the astonishing diversity that once existed, and for the processes that shaped the biosphere. If this trip into the deep past captivated you, leave a comment with your thoughts, give the video a like, and subscribe for more adventures through geological time. Would you like to explore other periods? Maybe the Carboniferous, with its vast swamp forests and insects the size of birds of prey? Or the Devonian, when the first vertebrates took their tentative steps onto land? Or the Triassic, when life recovered from the Permian catastrophe and the first dinosaurs appeared? Drop your suggestions in the comments. Thank you for joining me on this extraordinary journey into the late Permian, more than 252 million years ago. A world before dinosaurs, a world of forgotten giants, a world that reminds us of both the fragility and the resilience of life on Earth. I'll see you in the next adventure through time.